So while our systems are super popular with livestock and other ranchers, they're also great for homesteads and other off-grid applications where you need to pump water and you might not have utility power. So this crew here, you can see, they're setting up their submersible pump. There's a nice A-frame off-grid house in the background there. One of the things that stands out to me is if you check out here, this looks like they used to have another pump in there. So this is looking like PVC pipe. Looks like it might be a little rusted or discolored there. These are what they call 20-foot sticks. So a 20-foot stick of pipe is 20 foot long, and that makes installation much more difficult. So here they're using our poly pipe. So the poly pipe's flexible. It allows you to stretch out the pipe, you can get everything laid out nicely, and then very carefully, with a couple of people, lower that pump and all the pipe and wire down into the well. If you're using these 20-foot sticks, it would sit up 20 feet up here, and it would need to be supported at the top because it's rigid pipe and we don't want it to flex over and possibly break. On the left here, it's got a heat gun out. I'm not quite sure exactly what he's doing with the heat gun in this picture. Most of the time we'd use the heat gun to do our splice. And so the pump comes with a couple of feet of wire on there. Depending on your exact install depth, they're gonna need to install additional wire. And we have a really easy crimp kit and heat shrink tubing kit to make a nice waterproof connection. They use a heat gun or a lighter or other heat source to shrink down and do that connection. I think in this case, it might have been cold out that day, and the poly pipe can get a little bit rigid in cold temperatures. So I think he's warming it up a little bit to make it easier to put onto our barb. And then from here, we're going from our barb. It looks like he put a check valve here. For some of our deeper installs or low producing wells, we'll add a check valve. It's not required, it's optional depending on the application, and then down over into our pump. So this is a great example of a team coming together to install the pump. These are super fun to set up. You can bring your children out, you can bring relatives, bring your buddies out with a case of beer, spend the afternoon, install your solar well pump, and get it running that same day. So this next one, it looks like our RPS 800 system, submersible well pump, well located down here, as you can see. Top of pole mount again, holding our 8 panels up here, and then our controller here with the drop wire going down to the pump. So you can actually see here, they have 4 batteries installed on this system. So majority of our systems, the 800 included, can take battery backup, which is gonna help pump on cloudy days. The 4 batteries are located here. With the batteries, we wanna match the same number in series as our panels in series. So here we have 4 panels in series, so we're gonna have 4 batteries in series for a 48 volt system. These are actually on a pallet, it looks like here. This is okay for short term in temperate climates. I'd probably recommend building some sort of little enclosure to hold those batteries. I've seen this a lot, it seems to work for people, but you do want to avoid direct sunlight really heating up those batteries, and then if it drops a little bit colder than freezing at night, it's better to prevent the batteries from freezing. So a nice little enclosure will help just provide a little bit of insulation on it, keep the sun off them, and try to keep the temperature down a bit. But I've seen this a lot, and it seems to work for people, just leaving the batteries out. So kind of each their own on how they want to do the setup here. In the back, we also have our frost-free hydrant. So they're going from the well here into the hydrant. Then they look like they have like a 4-way splitter on here, running off to some drip lines. I see a hose. Also looks like they have a little like hoop house in the back here for their plants. Getting them to start a little bit earlier in the season. So a very nice solar well pump setup. It looks like it's working really well for them. They probably have these lines running over the hoop house and this running over to a sprinkler to help water some of the plants here. So this next picture we have here is an excellent installation of what we call our water secure system. So our water secure system can power existing AC well pumps using a large inverter, batteries, and our solar panels, which I'll show you in a second. So if you already have an existing well down in your pump and you don't want to pull it and replace it with a dedicated solar pump, that's where our water secure system comes into play. So this is a great system here that we see installed. We got a lot going on. So this is over here, all existing equipment. So you can see we have our really large bladder pressure tank. This is 100 gallons plus, which is great for a household. This isn't really part of the whole system. This looks like an on-demand hot water heater. We have our standard action pressure switch going to our well. I don't see our well here, so somewhere along the way, One of these pipes is coming from the submersible pump down the well, pumping water into the bladder tank, and then it's also running over to the hot water heater, and then that's probably going off into the household to run the household pressure system. So this equipment's all existing for this customer. They didn't want to pull up their well pump. They have a really nice setup here, so they didn't want to disturb it, but they did want to secure their water supply in case of grid outages, downtime due to damage of power lines, storms, whatever else was taking down their power. They wanted to make sure they can continue pumping water on those days. Plus they're going to save a little bit of money because the majority of the time, or all the time, that pump's going to be running off of solar, helping cut their utility bill. So this is the heart of the water secure system. That's our controller. That has a built-in charge controller. So we can see these wires running in here are coming from the solar array. I'll show you those in a couple of seconds. They're running into our DC disconnect, out of the DC disconnect, and into the water secure. In turn, that water secure has an MPPT charge controller. So that is managing charging of our batteries over here. These look like they're all in series. So this would be one of our 48 volt systems, which would either be the water secure 6K or 12K. Based on the size of this definitely looks like the 6K. So that provides 6,000 watts of output power to run their pump down here. So they have 2 sets of battery banks. These ones, you can tell, are a gel series of maintenance-free lead-acid batteries. VLRA, if you're familiar with some of the terms. Maintenance-free, so they're sealed, which means you don't have to go check water levels over time. And they're also gel, and so gel is really great for solar installations. It can handle deeper discharges and more cycle lifetime. So those batteries, you can see, are running through these wires into the bottom of our water secure. With our water secure, the batteries are required. It's not a direct drive system, so those batteries need to be hooked up. And with a system like this, you're going to want batteries because you want that pump to be able to run anytime it needs to recharge the system. So whether that's in the middle of the night, in the evening when people are taking showers, the system's going to gather all of that solar energy throughout the day when the sun is shining, store it in the batteries, and then allow you to use it anytime when you need to recharge this tank. The great thing about the water secure, and a feature of how we designed it, is if they have existing AC, and I'm trying to see, looks like we have existing AC running from this AC disconnect here. So utility power is coming in here, it's flowing down into this connector, and then through this connector into the water secure. So AC power in is not a requirement of water secure, but it is an option, which is great. Because the majority of the time you can run off of solar and your batteries, but if the system ever drops too low, say you have a bunch of cloudy days in a row and you still want to maintain your normal watering and household water usage schedule, the system will automatically kick over to AC power. It's going to run off of AC power until the batteries get recharged, and then it's going to kick back over to solar and battery power and off of AC. So we have our output here. This is running down through this connector and into the pressure switch, and then from the pressure switch it's running over down to the pump. So overall, it's a really great, reliable system. Like I mentioned, you don't have to have the AC installed. If you don't have AC or you don't want AC installed, no problem. This just doesn't get connected. And then you need to be a little bit more careful with your water usage if you have a string of cloudy days in a row. And especially in a case where you do have AC power and it's a grid down environment, then you can kind of cut back on your water usage if you're finding you're running low on power. So not a huge deal if you skip a couple of watering cycles for your garden and make sure you maintain water in your household during a grid down or emergency situation. But this is a super reliable backup or primary power source for your existing AC submersible well pump. So let's jump over here. We're going to do a side-by-side view. On the top, we have that same picture with our complete setup, and then on the bottom, we have our solar panels. So in this case, we're using 8 solar panels to recharge this system. You can see the panel wires are running off of here. Then they did a good job. They're going into conduit. That conduit is running underground into their pump house, or possibly their garage over here, where all the equipment is located. So a very nice, clean installation of a water secure system is going to provide them years of reliable water pumping for the existing well pump. So one of the great things about this water secure system is, depending on your exact usage, you're going to be able to expand it over the time. So if you're pumping a lot of water during the day and you find that your battery bank is dropping, then you can just add more solar panels to refresh during the day the power into your batteries. If you find you're using more water at night, then you can also add more batteries and more solar panels just to increase the overall capacity of the system. So that's one of the things I love about the water secure system, is its flexibility and expanding in the future. And so you can start with a smaller one, get your water secure set up with all your other equipment, and then as you go, if you find you're using more water, or even you decide to plant a garden, or just your overall water use is increasing, then you can add more solar panels and or more batteries to increase the capacity of the system and the number of gallons or number of days you can go in a grid down situation. Great, so let's check out this next installation. This is also a solar submersible well pump install. We have two things going on here. On the left, we have our well casing. On the right here, we have what's called our frost-free hydrant. And we'll go over what both of these are doing. So first, let's talk about the well casing. On top, we have a well cap. And in cold environments, and you can see there's mountains back behind, we're going to use a well cap and a pitless adapter, which is down below the ground, to prevent freezing of our drop pipe. In warmer climates, we'll use a well seal. In this case, since it's a freezing climate, they're using a well cap. So what that is down below here, around 2 or 3 feet below the ground, below the frost line, is what's called a pitless adapter. And that allows our drop pipe to connect through the side of the well casing to our line that's running wherever we need to bring the water. So that's going to be down here. It's going to be a hole in the side of the well casing, and that pipe's going to come out through the pitless adapter and connect to whatever we want. What they're connected to in this case looks like what we call a frost-free hydrant. So again, it's a cold environment, and so they're using the frost-free hydrant. And that also has a valve down underground below the frost line. I actually have one over here that I can pull up and show you real quick. So there's a handle on top, and this connects to a rod which goes all the way down to the bottom of here, and the water is coming in through the bottom. So that valve opens and closes and allows the water to run up and out of our faucet here. So when we open it, the water is going to start to run. Now what makes it a frost-free hydrant is when we close it, number one, it shuts off the water supply so no more water runs out. Number two, you can see there's this little extra hole here. This little extra hole connects to a drainage area. So when it closes, it allows all the water to drain back out through the pipe and down underground. And these connections are low enough under the ground to prevent freezing below the frost line. So this is what's called a frost-free hydrant. So he's gone ahead and hooked up his hydrant. And it looks like he's running it through a garden hose over to a sprinkler over here, so we can move that sprinkler around and water his yard. So one thing I don't see here, which I hope he installed, is what's called a reverse action pressure switch. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to do what's called deadheading the pump. So we don't want the pump running while all of our connections are closed and there's no water running. That's okay for a very short period of time, but it can cause two issues. It can overpressurize his line and possibly damage his drop pipe, and if done for a long amount of time, it can overheat the pump because there's not water flowing through cooling our pump. So what the reverse action pressure switch would do is, if all the valves are closed and the pressure raises up, it would send a signal to the controller and tell the controller to shut off, protecting the system. Now that's not a requirement, and so usually we'll give them a warning and just say, hey, be very careful, don't turn on your pumping controller with all of your valves closed. So if you're careful with that and open up your valves or wherever you're supplying the water before you flick the on-off switch to the controller, you can get by without the reverse action pressure switch. In this case, he's just going to use the amount of water that the sprinkler's coming out, and that might vary throughout the day, but that's not a big deal as he moves that sprinkler around in order to water his large pasture here. So the last couple pictures we saw, those were submersible well pumps down on the bottom of a well. Now we can also use our pumps, whether a surface pump or also a submersible pump, for surface water applications like this guy did here. So he has a stream here and he needed to pump some water out of it into a storage tank and into some stock tanks for actually his hog farm. And so he put a large board across here because he needs something to hold the pump off of the bottom with most of our pumps, we don't want to suck all the clay and sand and silt that are going to be on the bottom of streams or ponds. We want them elevated a little bit. So this board across, it's probably also a walkway he has there, is where he's hanging his submersible pump off of that. And also here, which is a great idea, is a PVC jacket around it. So with this, you can see there's a bunch of vegetation around. We don't want that vegetation entering the water and then getting sucked up into our pump. That's gonna cause a couple of problems. It could clog our intake to the pump, and also it's gonna pump it all downstream. You're gonna end up with that vegetation in your tank, in your troughs. If you have any type of float valves, you could possibly clog up the float valve. So great idea here to include the shroud on the outside. This is super easy to make. You can check in the description below. We just put out a video about how to create this shroud, but basically it's a PVC tube with a cap on both ends, and then you can drill a bunch of holes in it. That might be fine if you use a small enough drill bit, or else you can then wrap that in hardware cloth to add as a secondary filter to filter out that large organic material. So here we have the pump down here hanging. It's gonna suck the water out of here and then pump down this tube into the tank. So let's go check out where that water is going. So here we have our split screen. Over here is where's the pump's located, and then that pipe's running here. It's running off a couple of 100 yards and then up and over into our tank here in order to provide a little bit of water. We can check out, he has his pigs here. Pigs can head over, drink that nice clean water. They don't have to get down into the stream, which is hard to fence off, so they can move that water to a usable location for his livestock to drink.